Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 298. We took a week off last week, but we are back, and we've got a guest who's been on before, but it's been a while. I think you were on. I think it was episode like 152 or 151, sometime back around then, Steffan. But yeah, we'll reintroduce Steffan in a minute. But we're going to do what we always do and go around the room. We're going to introduce ourselves and talk about anything that we have to promote or anything like that. I know a lot of us seem like we're working on some secret projects we can't really talk about yet. So, but I'm sure we all have something we can promote. So as far as me, you're on my channel. So that's where you can find me on YouTube. You can also find me at circworks.com, where you can pick up some tools for making comics, some digital tools that you can use to make comics. Also on my YouTube channel right here, you can find my series called Making Comics 101. It is a series, basically what it says, it's like everything you need to know about how to make comics, everything from coming up with your idea all the way to printing and publishing and everything in between. So definitely check that out if you're interested in making comics. So yeah, that's what I have to promote. And then I'm going to move over to Josh. Josh, what's going on with you?
All right. So I am working on a project that, I finished a project that I can't really talk about, but it's supposed to come out in May, if that gives any interest or generates any sort of buzz. And it's definitely going to be comic related. So, and over 100 pages. That's as much as I'm going to put out. But for now, you can check out my graphic novel about faith and mental illness. That's hand lettered, hand inked, and can be handed to you in print for under like $10, even under $5 on Amazon, which is insane. I don't know how that sale has managed to last for so long, but go take advantage of it. And if you don't want to take advantage of that low cost and just want to support your local comic shop, just ask that they order 2 stories by Joshua Kemble through Ingram, and yeah, they'll get that book for you. So other than that, just check me out on YouTube. I've been vlogging a lot more often recently, and sometimes getting myself into trouble doing it. So go check it out and let me know what you guys think. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, Corey, what do you got going? It looks like you're doing an animation over there.
I decided to start a parody news network. So I've figured out a way where I don't have to like animate everything all the time, and I can just write and then do the voice acting, and then so I'm kind of playing with it right now because I've been injured. I can't spend too much time doing what I normally do. So, but I think I'm a few days away from releasing the first episode.
I'm so excited about that, Corey.
We had no idea. Like we took a week off and we're all starting these like new projects that some of which we can't talk about, but like exciting stuff. So actually, I think I have mentioned what I was working on another show, so but not specific. So anyway, anything you want to promote, Corey?
No, not really. I mean, if you stay tuned to, you can always go to CoreyKerr.com, and I'll probably announce it on my newsletter if you sign up for the newsletter, or you can follow me on YouTube or Instagram. And yeah, when I launch it, it'll go somewhere. I'm not sure if I'm going to start it on its own channel or what at this point, but it'll be something that I'm going to do on the side so I can get more writing out.
Cool. Yeah, I'm anxious to see what. Yeah, this is all new to me. So, all right. So our guest Steffan Stewart is an illustrator, designer, brand strategist. He's actually based here where I am in Arizona, and we met each other a couple of years ago at a design conference, and just recently he reached out to me, and I was like, actually I reached out to him a little bit before because we were doing a drink and draw, so we're going to try to make that happen, but I figured why not have him on the show and then kind of reconnect, because it's been a while. I mean, dealing with with the pandemic and everything, you don't get to hang out with all your art buddies. So anyway, Steffan, how's it going, and anything you want to promote before we dive into the topic?
Good. Yeah, it's been good, and thanks again for having me on the show, Scott.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, not a whole lot I want to promote. I have a few projects like you guys that I have going on that I don't really can't really share. But as far as if anyone wants to check my stuff out, my agency's page is bridgephx.com, and my Instagram is just @Steffan Stewart.
Yeah, and I believe both of those links are in the description of this video. So if you click on those, you can follow Steffan to his website and his Instagram. So yeah, so we as we usually do, we kind of give our guest the opportunity to choose the topic, and you gave me a list of really good ones, and then we kind of narrowed it down to side hustles and personal projects, which I know my two co-hosts are going to be totally into that because they've got a lot of really interesting side hustles and personal projects. I guess not so much for me anymore. I guess those are all the same because I don't really have a full like a employee type job anymore. I'm kind of doing pretty much all just freelance and trying to build passive income streams and stuff like that. But I think I definitely I've had those situations where I've been employed or I've been doing one project and had other things going on, and I do have a bunch of other projects. So, but I know pretty much everyone here is going to be super passionate about this topic. So, I'll just start off with you, Steffan. What over the topics that we kind of suggested? Why did this one stick out to you, and what made you decide you wanted to dive into passion projects and side hustles?
I've been at this kind of this place lately, and I'm sure you guys have experienced it too. I'm sure most of us who design experience it, where you get so caught up in just grinding every single day on stuff that you get burnt out. You reach a period of burnout. For me, I run an agency with one partner, and we wear all of the hats. I do the proposals, I do all of the design, I do all of the front facing and meeting and strategy sessions and emails and calls and everything. And I get to a point where at the end of the day, I'm burnt out. And so I've had moments where I just lose touch. I start to almost resent what I do, and I love what I do, and I know we all do, and we reach those moments. And so I thought it would be a good topic to talk about. Mental health has been a thing that, especially since the pandemic started, and not having that kind of proximity within the creative community it makes it that much harder when we get caught up with all of the work and what we're doing in the constant grind, and just those feelings kind of come out. So I thought it was a good thing to talk about, is just passion projects and trying to keep that fire alive.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I assume that's why you reached out to me, and why I wanted to start doing more drinking draws and things, just because it's getting it's a little safer out there right now. And I just figured we got to hopefully start reconnecting with like-minded people in person. I think in person is also really important. Obviously, I'm really grateful to have Josh and Corey that I can talk with, online and everything. But it is nice to kind of get out and meet people in person if it's an option. So, yeah, I definitely, I'm right there with you. But yeah, I figure you were going to chime in, Josh. I mean, you in particular talk about this a lot. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good topic, and I'm glad you connected it to mental health and kind of connection and like a lack of burnout, because in art directing, I've experienced both experienced and like led teams of artists, and there's a significant difference between artists that are pursuing their own passions, like outside of what they do professionally, like on the clock. And then artists that are just all about the on the clock stuff. And in general, I've just noticed that there's like a suffering of like the quality actually ebbs and drops for artists who aren't active in their own passion projects. Because of the very thing you just described, where it's like you can kind of lose touch with what you love about art and what got you into creativity, when all you start doing is pursuing commerce, and that's all. I think it's important for artists. Like, the older I get, the more I actually think it's really valuable for artists to be active in taking risks, artistic risks, some that you can't even afford to take with a client, and also just to be actively pursuing the things that they're passionate about in art, because that will translate to client work as well. But it rarely goes the other way. And so like, I think it's really important. I think it's essential. I found it essential for myself. Like, I think it was like 2 years into art direction. My first 2 years were just figuring out how to do that, because it's such a different job than designing. And then 2 years in, I started feeling that burnout, and I realized it was because I wasn't working on the things I'm passionate about. And the second I started doing that, I started being a better art director and a better designer, and also taking things a little less personally with clients, because I had my own outlet. So it's like, if a client wants a really stupid font, they can have that font, and I'll use the good font on my own stuff. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, I think it's really, I love the topic, because I think it's not only just like, I know we're in an age where everybody feels like the need to have a side hustle, and I think that's really important too. But I do think like doing something outside of just pure commercial concern, even if that is commercial art, but just like out of the concern of just like the gun of like whatever the immediate thing that's feeding you is, I think it's really important, so
yeah.
Sorry, that was rambly, but I love the topic.
No. So I was going to ask, so when you are putting all this time in at work and everything, and obviously you're doing what you love, but there's always that desire to do something more personal. So when you're talking about being burnt out, and and a lot of people deal with this, where they they work all day, they come home, they feel burnt out. How do you find that the will to be creative on something different? I mean, how do you approach that stuff, and with like what gives you that drive to keep creating, even though you've been pretty much creating all day at the day job?
It's tough. What I've found helps me, and this, I mean, this just varies from person to person. I sometimes need to just get up and go for a walk, just get the hell away from everything, clear my head, and come back to it. But at the same time, I have a lot of things that I want to do, just personal goals within the creative space. Obviously, as Josh mentioned, there's the commercial side of things. I run a business, I do work for clients, and there's that service work aspect of it. But I have personal goals as a designer that I want to achieve as well. I want to win in X awards, or, I want to be featured in X or whatever. And I have a handful of just side projects that I started working on years ago. I mean, Scott, when we first met, one of the things that we talked about, I had these little Pokemon logos that I did and submitted to the Design Week for their little best of showcase. And I want to keep doing that. And I've done some illustrations of the characters, because I mean, that's been something that growing up as a kid, it's always been super near and dear to me as a series. So I just have fun little things like that I can kind of just escape with. I have a lot of fun doing it. And when I start, I just kind of zone in, and everything else that's bothering me just kind of goes away. So I think that it's good to have outlets like that, and creative or otherwise. I mean, I have a friend in the local community as well who is one of the most talented designers I've ever met in my life, and he just started pursuing a degree in music, and so he's studying music now. He's like, I'm doing design work to make my money and hold me off on the side. That's my day job, but I'm also studying at the same time, and I'm using music as an outlet, to try something new. And I think that's beautiful. And that kind of got me thinking. I played a lot of sports growing up. I played soccer my whole life, and in high school, I was all-state in soccer, and I wanted to play in college, but when I moved back down here to Phoenix, I didn't even get an opportunity to walk on. The coach only wanted international players, and I was like, okay, well, I guess this is where that journey stops. So when I heard my buddy talking about how he's going for a degree, and my sister plays, I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to try to make the time to find something similar, something that would be interesting to pursue education for, get enough credits to play college soccer, because I never got the chance to do that. There isn't an age cap. I'm almost 30. I'm getting up there. So I'm like, I might as well just say screw it and go for it and try to accomplish that part of my life that I never got around to. Not creative in any way at all whatsoever, but it's one of those things that I grew up with it. I was passionate about it for the longest time, and I want to at least see it through. So
that's pretty cool. Like, the one thing that I always bring up, like for me personally, it's like, a lot of people, they'll work, whatever job they have, if it's not in the creative field, and their outlet is to do something creative when they get home. And for me, like, I'm kind of like, well, I get to be creative when I'm, for my actual job. So it's almost like, yeah, my hobby and my interests are sort of my job.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to kind of the reverse of that, where you do your creative job and then you're finding, just this other thing that you love, that you're going after, that may not be necessarily in a creative thing. And I don't know. I mean, I guess we all have our interests, and some of them not so creative, but I don't know. For me, it's just like, it seems like, and I kind of want that, I want something that's maybe outside of some interest that's outside of the creative field. I know Josh is kind of similar, where, I mean, and music's a creative field as well, but Josh is he's kind of like a madman as far as going to work, coming home, working on his comic, and then finding time to put out an album. So I don't know.
But I think like that's important too, because like I started playing music again like a couple of years back, because growing up I was always in bands, like just rock bands locally, and I kind of put that part of me to sleep when I went to art school and started being serious. And then, as we all know, it's like super competitive, and you have to be really hungry to kind of make it in especially like early on in illustration and design. You have to be really just relentless, right? And so I kind of just put music to the side, because I was like, okay, I need to just focus on the art thing. And then a couple of years back, I just like started playing music again, and remembering how fun it is. And like, there is something cool about having something where with art, it's like, I feel like there's more of an end goal. Like if I make a comic, my goal is to get it published, to get it distributed, right? Like to get people to buy it. But like with music, it's just a fun thing where I can like play a show at a bar, and that's why I'm doing it. Just like to play a show at a bar to like a couple drunk people and get free beer. And it's fun. And it's like, I think it's important to, I don't know. I think like what you're describing about soccer sounds to me like that kind of thing, where it's like, it's kind of good to have something that's for fun, like
right.
outside of just the art thing, which is for fun, but also like we've managed to be the fortunate, I think, small group of people who are able to do the fun thing for a living. And that has the upside of like the day job's really fun, but like the downside of that is like, you need other outlets, right? Like a lot of people like go to their boring job where they don't do creative, and then they go home and they draw, and they're like, yes, I get to do creative. Whereas like we draw all day, so like being able to like go home and like practice soccer or something sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
Like as like a shift, just doing something for the pure fun of it,
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that too. So I have another buddy who I grew up with, and we played video games all the time growing up. I would spend summers at his place, and we would just kick it, play basketball, play video games, and that was just it, And he's played games his whole life. Just started streaming. Just decided, screw it, I'm going to start streaming, and put together a TikTok and all the stuff, and thought, you know what, like if this could become my full-time thing, that would be awesome. He got to a point of burnout with video games. He's like, now it just feels like a task. It's not fun. I'm not enjoying it anymore. Like the thing that I loved spending so much time on, it became work. And the instant it became work, I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. which is crazy. And I think a lot of people don't really think about that. And I think that's why that's, you know, at times we reach that point of burnout and we need to remove ourselves and take a step back. Because that's very real, no matter what the industry is, no matter what the hobby is. You know, once it's commercialized, and you're forced to do it every single day, you know, it can start to weigh on you a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about this recently as like an analogy to like a marriage, where it's like I love art and I love comics, and there are times where I get home and I do not want to do art or comics because I've done commercial art all day, and it's very much like a marriage or like a relationship with someone you love, where it's like sometimes, and like you basically have to actively practice it even if you're not feeling it. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately because I feel like that makes me love art even more. Like when I get off work, I don't feel like working on comics, and then I sit down and work on the comic, I usually end up discovering something about the process that I really enjoy or love, or maybe get in touch with something that I forgot about art or design. And it's like, it's a way for me to actively pursue the thing and keep that love alive so that I don't get burnt out. But it's a weird thing because I do think a lot of people who don't do it commercially aren't used to like sort of forcing themselves to work on stuff even when they're not feeling it, you know? But then when you're doing it commercially and you're constantly working on stuff even when you're not feeling it, it's like to try to find that flicker it's a real weird like conundrum. I don't know. Corey, do you have any like kind of take on this? Because I know like when you were a creative director and stuff, like you definitely, I think, experienced burnout, right? With like,
oh yeah.
So
yeah. I didn't illustrate during the day though. Like I was mainly doing more design and photography and some video. So we didn't have a ton of illustration there. So I could come home and illustrate. And then for the last 20 years, I had the motorcycle as kind of an outlet. And that's the reason that's funny is I just broke 7 ribs and my collarbone in 2 places. So I'm kind of done with the bike.
Yeah, the bike was an outlet until it hit a street outlet. And,
right. Yeah. The bike was an outlet until it broke me. But actually, I'll start physical therapy on Monday, so hopefully I'll get all that back soon. But yeah, no, I now I just, because I'm teaching now, I just talk about creative stuff all day long, and I'm like dying to do it when I get home because I'm so sick of talking about it. But yeah, I kind of come at this a little bit differently than Josh, because Josh, you tend to have really long form projects, and I'll juggle a couple like short to medium sized projects. And if it hits 6 months, I'm kind of burning out on the side thing. So I usually will do something that I don't know how to do all of it yet, because that's what keeps kind of the novelty and the outlet for me is like continuing to push myself and learn something new, and and use that in an interesting way. So yeah. And anyway, so that's kind of how I do it. And if I get into a rut where it's like I understand every step of the process and I know how to do everything in the project, that's usually when I'm done with that project and I move on to something else.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like kind of keeping yourself, like it's like you almost have to keep yourself challenged or interested or exploring something you haven't. I think that's what keeps me hooked on comics, because it's like you really can't master comics.
Right.
Even the masters haven't mastered comics, because there's always like a design problem in there. But I think that's pretty amazing. The idea of like pursuing something like a sport or just drawing for fun actually sounds like a good outlet. That's something I should probably pick up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of so I guess I'm sort of like in the middle, like what Corey was talking about. I definitely have ADHD, and like I do like those smaller projects. I mean, the comic book is a long-term project, but it's kind of like Josh. He works on it. He's got the set hours. He works on it, and so I kind of have that too. Where usually I wake up in the morning, I work on my comic for about an hour, and just let that time accumulate until it's done. And it's just not like a super big rush to get it done, but just knowing that a little bit here, a little bit there will add up. But then, the rest of my projects, it's like, oh, I got an idea for a coloring book, so I'll design a series of coloring books, and then I get another idea, and so I've got all these different things. But for me, that's kind of what keeps it interesting, at not doing the same thing day in and day out. But even if you're at a, even if you're like Steffan and you have an agency, I mean, I'm sure the work is always different. It's always changing depending on your clients, or when I was working in game design, it's ever changing as well. So it definitely is interesting. I just think I think even if you do a creative job, you go in, you do a creative job, as your 9 to 5, so to speak. And you're doing something creative when you get home. I think it helps to have it different enough. If you're doing logo design at I don't know. I mean, say if you're doing logo design stuff at your, at the agency, and then you come home, but you're putting a different spin on it. Like you kind of touched on this. I'll just fill everyone in because it's kind of a cool project. I don't know if I assume it's on your Instagram. You may have to dig back, but what Steffan did was he took Pokemon, and he made like a bunch of different logo designs featuring Pokemon. Like he would do like Pikachu. It was like a power company, and it would be like Pikachu. And I mean, you can elaborate and fill people in a little more, but just a brilliant idea. But you're kind of taking what putting a different spin on it, and it's kind of just for fun, but I'm sure you got a lot of attention from that because of the popularity of Pokemon and such a cool idea behind it.
Yeah, no, and it's a super fun project, and I feel really guilty because I haven't even worked on one of them in probably over a year. But I follow this designer, RJ Palmer, who's incredible. And when I was in college, I used to watch I used to see some illustrations he would do where he would take a Pokemon character and illustrate it as, hey, this is what this would look like in real life. And he would flesh it out and make it feel organic and give it dimension. And he would do the thing that you see in those old dinosaur books where it's got the T-Rex and then it's got the person like waving. And it's like, yeah, here's a size comparison. But he did it with Pokemon characters. And I thought it was just the coolest thing in the world. And I was just constantly look up like, okay, where can I find all of this stuff? Found his DeviantArt, went through all of his stuff on DeviantArt. To find out he did all of the character design. Like that led the Pokemon company to hire him to do all of the character design artwork for that Detective Pikachu movie.
Oh, awesome.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
So that got me thinking. I was like, well, I love doing illustration, but I also love doing logo design. That's what I do every day. So why don't I just do something kind of like that and just make logos for every character and try to think of creative ways to make up a company for each character. And it's the most insanely huge, daunting project because there are now roughly 1,000 characters and different variations of characters. And so it's like, am I ever going to finish this thing? By the time I get even into 20 of them, there will be another set of 100 that comes out, and it's like, all right, well, shit. What do you do?
I didn't know the goal was to do all of them.
Yeah, that was the goal. Young and dumb, thinking, hey, this isn't going to be too bad. I can pump out one of them a day. No. That's just not possible.
Yeah.
I think the hardest part of it is like trying to think of what's the company going to be for which one of them, and what's the name going to be, what's the industry, and then start designing something. It's like it all just takes a lot of time. And so it's a fun project though. I really enjoy it. And that's one of those passion projects that's on the side. That whenever I can get around to it, I get around to it. Another one I recently started was those original Game Boy Color games. I started just re-illustrating the sprites of the characters just in my own style, but using the same poses and color palettes, just illustrated. I've only gotten through 7 or 8 of them, and I haven't touched one of those in almost a year too. So That's just what happens when you get tied up, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, if I do have time to sit down and work on something like that, it does feel like an escape, and it's nice to just step away. And I think the whole challenge with the logo one in particular is I wanted to push myself to try different styles and different techniques. So if anyone has seen them before or checks out my Instagram, you'll see that like every one of them is in a different style.
Yeah.
So I'll try to push myself to not do the same thing and do cookie cutter logos for every one of them that looks exactly the same. So,
Yeah,
so that was a big part of the challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said before about your friend, how, and I've heard this story multiple times from, you know, different situations where somebody's just doing sort of a fan project and it catches the eye of whoever owns that IP or whatever, and then they end up hiring them to do to actually work on the project. So yeah, I remember a while back where there was the where they took this was a while back, but they took all the NFL helmet designs and did like Star Wars versions of them. And I mean, there's so many interesting takes if you just use a little creativity of taking something that you love and you know, putting a different spin on it. And even if it's, you know, even if you can't really monetize it because you don't own the IP, it's still, you know, it definitely can catch the eye of a lot of people, and maybe even whoever's the, you know, the IP holder or whatever, and you might get a nice little offer to work on a Detective Pikachu movie.
Yeah, that was actually one of the wishful thinking kind of things with it, is like, hey, you know, maybe something can, because I was watching the Detective Pikachu movie. They're in the city and there's a bunch of like city lights and signs outside of different like bars and shops, and they're just, you know, cutouts of the original illustrations just kind of outlined, and it's like little effort put into stuff like that, like of the logos. I was like, I've done a bunch of these logos. I could be like, hey guys, use my stuff, or I can make some of this stuff. So I was thinking it would be really cool to make like in the games there's a thing called like a Pokédex. It's like a glossary of all of the characters and whatnot. And so I was thinking it would be cool to do kind of like a logo dex where I'll just do a different mark with some kind of mock-up or real world use of the logo. One of them was a flute logo, and I had one of my students, when I taught design over at GCU, had one of my students who was in 3D modeling build out a flute 3D model and render it with grass and everything, just kind of sitting in the grass, so I could laser etch the logo onto it in Photoshop. And he sent that over to me. I was like, sick. You know, it's like one of the first steps to do something like that. But it's just hard to do that for every single one of them and keep it moving. But I do want to revisit it pretty soon here.
Yeah, definitely. So Josh, I mean, I shouldn't just single you out, because I mean, just like, I mean, Josh, I mean, I just know Josh and Corey both, just the it's kind of going back to that whole burnout thing. And I mean, I know you've touched on it before, but you know, working, especially even with especially Josh, I guess, just because the commute he's got the commute, he's got the day job, you know, spends time with his family. And I think maybe that's all you do besides, and then work on art. No, but you find time for music and everything too. But it's like, I mean,
and he's becoming a luthier as he's like redoing his guitars.
I don't need to anymore because I just bought a legit US Gibson. So now I have a US Gibson and a Made in America Fender. So I really should stop messing with guitars, because those are perfect guitars.
Was it the Strat? As soon as you started messing with that low end Strat, I was like, oh, this is a rabbit hole, man. You're gonna get the little micron ruler and start like shaving off the frets.
Oh, I did. I mean, I probably like I modded all my old Squires, and then I stopped dead on like one. So I have like 3 guitars that I modded. I have too many guitars. But yeah. So like, I think for me it comes down to like thinking about like who and what you want to be in life. So like if your end goal, you know, is to design logos for clients and the specific clients you have, and you've arrived, then it's about like finding things that keep you content during that arrival. For me, it's like my end goal is not to be an art director. My end goal is to put out some books, and it's not necessarily even to like make a living on those books. It's just to make some really good books. So, like if that's my goal and I'm not like working towards it, I find that I'm really unhappy. So I work towards it, and then like I kind of discipline myself so that I'm working on it consistently. And I have like a list of like priorities that helps me a lot. So, it's like, obviously like my comics aren't going to come before my family, right? Like, or my very immediate friends. But it's like on my list of priorities in life, like comics are like right under that, and so just, I don't know, it just kind of comes down to that. Like for me, it's like, I like to think about like, who do I actively want to be? And am I being that? And if I'm not being that, then like, I should work on being that, So I don't know if that makes sense. Like I want to be somebody who creates music. So I'm creating music. I want to be somebody who creates comics. So I make comics. Like, if I didn't want to be somebody who made music, then I wouldn't do it, like, and I want to be somebody with a career in art that can like provide for my family. And so I art direct, so it's like, I don't know. It's, that to me is like the big part. That's like an indicator. Like, I feel like a lot of artists I meet, and don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm like happy all the time. I think that's like an illusory thing. Like, I don't think you ever reach the top of a mountain creatively and go like, haha, I've arrived. Like everything's great now. But I definitely think like I have seen a lot of discontentment with artists who have like killer jobs, like way cooler than ones I've had, like in the National Cartoonist Society, there's guys who've like directed Disney movies and they express all these regrets for not working on their great novel or their great book or their personal animation. And I'm like, but you were up for an Oscar, like it's like you would think that like they'd be there, they'd have arrived. But like the one common thread I see with most creatives is like they want to do that stuff that's like the creative vision stuff, the fun stuff. And so like I feel like I feel like if you wait for like conditions to be perfect to do the thing you ideally want to do with art, then you're going to be waiting forever. Imagine if Milton Glaser had just sat on that I Heart New York and just never made it because he's like, I don't really have a client for this, like, that would have just been a real bummer for design, although that Dylan cover I think was commercial, so that was pretty good.
No, I mean, going back to kind of what you're saying with working on the comic, and that, even if you're not making money off of that, it's just the act of creating and putting something out there. And I've kind of, and it kind of, at least in my career, it's gone through cycles, and I've put out a couple of different videos, along on my journey. And one of them I think was something like why I quit freelancing and got a real job back when I started working in game design. And then since then, the game design company shut down, and then I went somewhere else and whatever. And then just all these different career changes and everything. And then, people still comment on that video, and I'm like, yeah, well, that's not really where I am now anymore. And it always changes. But what my reasoning behind that at the time was, I just felt like I was freelancing. I was doing a lot of the stuff that I like to do, creating stuff for clients and everything. But to me, there was so much of my time that was just looking for clients or cultivating that, growing the business and everything. And at some point that wasn't as much fun, or it was taking up more time than the actual creativity. So that at that point in my career, that's why I decided to, go look for a full-time job. And then I could just as somebody else handles all that stuff, I don't have to seek out the clients and everything like that. And then I can just focus on creating comics and stuff. And then, you know, and the other major shift in, I guess, in my career was initially it was all about creating, you know, creating client work, working for clients. Like basically I had this attitude back then where I wasn't, you know, I'm not going to spend my time working on an art project other than maybe comics or something, but unless I'm getting paid to do that. And then somewhere along the line, I kind of shifted all that, and I'm like, no, now I just want to create stuff and then put it out there, and hopefully hopefully I get paid for it, and move away from doing client work and just try to build passive income streams. So, you know, it's, you know, I guess what I'm saying is basically where you are right now with, you know, with your career, your side projects. I mean, that changes. I mean, you could totally do a 180 shift like I did. So, you know, and I don't regret, I mean, I don't regret any part of my career. It's kind of led me to where I was. And at that time, what I was doing was perfect for that time. And now what I'm doing is perfect for the time that I'm doing now. But just recognize that, you know, if you are in that resistance and that burnout and everything, then maybe it's time to kind of shift into something else. So I don't know. You guys.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that too. And you know, when I graduated from design school years back, you know, my design program was relatively new. I was the first graduating class, and so they were still figuring out all the kinks. And so I took, just for a typical digital design degree, I took animation, 3D modeling, website design, photography, life drawing, everything across the gamut. There wasn't really a focus. And so going through that, I was thinking, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this. And I just had all these shiny objects of things I liked because the courses were fun and engaging. And so kind of to coattail off what you were saying, you know, ambitions can change, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, once you start to feel a level of burnout, it's okay to pivot. Which is something I've started to realize for me. You know, I love design. I'm never going to stop designing. I'm never going to stop loving design. I'm at a point where I've been doing a lot of service work for clients and not as much work for me. And I know a lot of us run into that. And I think that's where it starts to get challenging, where you're like, do I want to do something different? And I think the truth is, you know, it's not necessarily that you need to do something different. You just got to get your priorities right. I'm personally in kind of a transitional period there, where as I'm running so many things and wearing so many hats, you know, running a design business, I've got to suck it up and put my ego aside and realize I can't do all of these things and keep myself happy. And I can't make the time for my relationship, for my family, for my personal passion projects, unless I start delegating some of these things elsewhere. So now I'm starting to say, okay, got a design team. I've got to use them. I've got to give them stuff instead of doing every logo project, every illustration project. I've got to leverage the people that I have and trust them to do it better than I can. Brand strategy, I've got to just let that go and let somebody else do it for me, and just focus on the things that make me happy. And that'll give me the time to focus on my passions and the design stuff, and keep the mental health in check at the end of the day. And that's kind of like personally where I'm at. I'm sure you guys have experienced some similar stuff as well.
Yeah,
dude, delegation is huge. Like that's another thing that changed within like my first 2 years as an art director. I was just doing everything because I was coming from like prior to that, I spent like 15 years like doing freelance illustration and graphic design and running my own business. And so it was like, to go to somebody else's business and like not have to do all of the work was just so weird to me. And I kept, you know, because I knew I could do everything individually really well, I would just take on everything. And then of course that caused burnout, because you can't like, you can't like at a certain level of business, at least, you can't hold on to all the chips and cards. Like you have to actually delegate. That's like 90% of like art direction is like wisely delegating and then leading and like communicating so that things actually come out the way you desire. But like if you hold on to everything, I mean, that definitely was leading me towards burnout. So I've definitely gotten better at that. I've gotten better at like not staying overtime, unless absolutely necessary, like just planning, strategizing better. But like, I also totally understand what Scott's talking about, because half of why I started art directing as well was just because I never had time to work on comics when I was working for myself. And a lot of what I was doing was like drawing whatever the hell I want, and people would pay me to put it on t-shirts. And I realized that like even in doing that, I didn't really have a lot of freedom, because even when you're drawing whatever you want and putting it on items, it's still based to a market. So it's like, you know, inevitably, like if people want giant robots on t-shirts, then that's what you kind of have to draw on t-shirts. Like you can kind of draw other stuff, but like there's going to be a season where you just kind of like every time you draw a giant robot, it pays for your food. So you're going to be drawing giant robots a lot. My point being, like, because of that kind of the market being so demanding, I found that like working freelance full time was just like I never had time to work on my comics. It took me twice as long to get a graphic novel done as it has now, where I have like a schedule that's fairly predictable. But tacking onto what Scott was also saying, I do think that's in flux, because like creative jobs are like all over the place. So like next week I could be like running my own thing or having to start up my own thing. Because these things come and go. I feel really fortunate to have my position now, and like have held it for like, you know, I think it's like my 7th year. But like, I also make no pretense that like that it's permanent. You know, even if it's your own business, it's just like it's such a tough market with art. It's hard to know. And I've had a lot of friends with like dream jobs and stuff that like fold overnight. So it's like it's hard to know. And I think I do think, like Scott, what you're doing is very inspiring, with like kind of building up your own assets and just sort of having more faith in your products and like passive income and creating those streams and stuff. But anyhow, what you were saying about kind of delegating kind of definitely hits home, because it's like you if you delegate more, you'll ease a lot of stress, undue stress, because you can't be 50 designers, you know, or you can, but it's like, for how long? You know?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you touched on, Josh, was that keeping that schedule. And I think for people who are finding it difficult, I think that's sort of the best advice you can give, is that, I mean, you have a certain set time that you put aside to work on your personal projects, and the more you work on that, it just becomes like, it's like a habit, you know. You're just like, oh, this is what I do. And you know, it's kind of similar with me with the comic, even though it's not a big amount of time. It's like an hour a day to work on a comic, and it all adds up. And so, but that hour is usually the same time. You know, it's usually early in the morning, where Josh is when he gets home after he puts his kid to bed. So there's all that, you know, but you know, building those habits and everything, as far as if you want to get a personal project, if you want to make headway on it, my advice is not just like, oh, I've got a little time here or a little time there.
Yeah.
Try to set aside a certain amount of time, if that's possible, to do it. And then, you know, once it becomes something that you just, like I said, it's just a habit that you just, this is what I'm doing right now. And then, you know.
And it's a lot like working out, like what Scott's talking about. It's like, it's a lot like working out, where it's like nobody has time to work out, right? But also nobody has the health to not work out. Like, meaning, like, you reach a certain point in life where you like have to be doing some kind of exercise, or your body's going to pay for it, right? And so part of getting in the habit of like working out is like you start developing these habits, like daily habits. And it's weird, because it kind of becomes addictive, and you get to the point where, you know, if you don't work out, you feel terrible. Like you just feel like almost like a nicotine addict, who's just like, I need a cigarette so bad, like it's like that, but with a positive habit. And I think it becomes like that with personal projects where, and so I totally agree with Scott, but one thing I want to correct, and I think Scott would correct this too about what Scott said, is when you're like, if you have the time, don't say if you have the time, you have the time, make the time. Because like otherwise there will never be time. Like if you wait for perfect calm seas, you're never going to sail,
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting to, because I was thinking about this the other day as I was thinking about Josh and I. So a couple of years ago is when we started doing the 48-hour art check, and we did that because we both recognized that we were kind of doing this like kind of peaks and valleys level of production where we'd like spike and then burn out and spike and burn out. And we did 285 episodes of that.
Yeah, that was nuts, but awesome.
Yeah. But then now I think we've transitioned and we've become people who just a steady, consistent level of production on the side work, to the point where, when he has to like stop to redo his floor and can't do it, or I like break the right half of my body, it's not like I'm excited to be a consumer. Like a lot of people would look at like, my job took care of me and everything. And I literally had like a month where I could just read books and watch TV and play video games. And I hated it. It was awful. Like I was chomping at the bit to get back to it. And it's been, I don't know, 8 weeks or something now. And I'm just barely to the point where I can put in like maybe 90 minutes a day. And I am dying to do more. And it's interesting to see the transition of like the struggle, and then that becomes the new normal. And then it becomes weird to not do the thing.
Yeah.
But not in like an unhealthy way. Cause there's the other side of the coin is like this like cult of busy and worship of the hustle culture where you basically like burn the candle at both ends and you're just like some sort of like money-making zombie. It's like I could make a lot more money than I'm making, but like it would be a soulless, hollow life. Like I'd rather create things that I enjoy doing rather than like always try to squeeze a dime out of every interaction and every moment of my life. And so there's that balance of becoming somebody who enjoys creating, and desires that. I think initially I was doing it as kind of like a self-medication thing, like to keep the demons at bay. And I've transitioned into it being part of a very positive and uplifting part of my life.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah. It just kind of almost becomes like not a part of your identity, but just like a part of, like, where people consume like a TV show that they love and they get all excited when they meet somebody who like talks about that TV show. For me, it's like that, where it's like, I'm eager for the next episode kind of feeling, where it's like, I'm eager for the next time I get to sit down and create. And I'm eager to meet people who are doing the same activity. It's almost like flipped consumption, to creation, but it's like, but I agree with you. It is interesting being on the other side of the coin, and also that being kind of the new challenge, where it's like now it's not really a challenge to sit down and do it. It's more of a challenge to like recognize times where I would be pushing past that point and become the kind of burnout junkie. It's interesting. That's an interesting transition. And also, I don't envy your position because that would suck.
It sucks so bad. But yeah, it is interesting. So I'm always curious on like the impetus of it, like what, because I teach, and so I'm trying to figure out like I think the number one thing that is an indicator of a student who's going to do well or not do well is whether they of their own volition go out and make stuff on their own. Like they go do their own Pokedeck thing. They go do their own, whatever it is, it doesn't matter how important or funny or silly or awesome or whatever, just somebody who like chooses to spend time doing something rather than just waiting to be told to do something, that person is going to be successful.
I think that's 100% spot on. When I was teaching, one of the things that I did for my students, and you can tell almost right away, like you said, Corey, which ones have that kind of potential, because they'll just go out and they'll make shit, and their work shows for it.
Yeah.
But when I was teaching, one of the things I did is I told my students, hey, like, I can show you these presentations all day and run through the syllabus on, the principles of design and all of this kind of stuff. And I could do that all day. You're not going to remember it when you graduate. No one's going to be thinking of, oh, what are the principles of no one. It's not a thing. No one professional takes that seriously or gives a single, excuse my language, shit about it. And so what I would do is I would say, hey, what really matters is doing personal work. I will give you extra credit points if you, every Tuesday and Thursday when you come into class, show me a project that you've been working on just in your own time. I don't want to see this stuff that we're doing for class because it's just the generic stuff. By the time we end this class, I want you guys to have a portfolio that you can showcase, because at the end of the day, you can have a portfolio of classwork that's it's passable, it's good enough, it's the logo for the pineapple delivery truck that you were required to make for one of your projects, and you can tell it's very, very much a student project, or it's that illustration that you did when you stepped aside after class and you just put your head down and you just grinded on this thing, put everything you had into it. That's the work that's going to get you hired somewhere. That's right. What people want to see. That's what shows your actual chops, not the stuff that you half-assed.
Dude, so true. Like I can guarantee this. I have talked to, I've taught college level, and then also as an art director, I meet teachers and art directors, and we always joke about there are like telltale signs of specific years of graduates from specific schools in their portfolios, because they all look the same. You don't want to be that person. Like, have the personal work, because like I can tell Art Center 2010, like every portfolio, and you'd think like Art Center, amazing school. It is an incredible school. But when I'm reviewing portfolios, when I see an Art Center 2010, I'm like, yep, there's 2010 Art Center. That's Northridge. That's like the stupid logo design where you use the initials of yourself and then you like knock the counter out and make that like, maybe one of the letters is in the counter of the letter. Like it there, and I see it like on a million portfolios. So yeah, like 100% what you're saying. Do the personal work, do the work that's outside of school, even if it's like stuff you're learning in school. And hopefully get teachers that give you projects that you can get passionate about and put your own personality in,
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that's helped me a lot, just in the day-to-day stuff too. I mean, we talked before we jumped on and went live about just a couple things that we're all working on. I'm working on a side business of creating a platform for designers to sell logos. I'll work on logo projects for clients, and I'll be building the logos for them. I know what they want. I have an idea of what they're looking for, and I'll just throw some crazy, just out of the box ideas in there just for fun and see, like, just get weird with it and see what they think. Knowing that, hey, worst case scenario, I'm going to have more logos for myself to show and to use for this platform down the road, and just build up that kind of book of logos. And so, like, for me, that's a little bit of an escape, right? Like, in the day to day, I just try to have fun and get weird with it, because a lot of times I just get caught in the, oh, it's a tech company, or, oh, it's a cybersecurity company, so I gotta make a cybersecurity logo. And it's not very glamorous or fun or anything, but get weird with it, have a good time, make something that, is for you, just within the mix. And don't tell them about it, of course, but
I love that though. And you can see this with great designers' portfolios. I mean, some of my favorite design books are like those Chip Kidd books, like book 1. And it's like, you'll see his like 5 iterations of a book cover that Knopf killed. And then they went with the final one, which was good. I mean, it's Chip Kidd, but it's so cool to see the iterations that got shot down. And if you find a way to take those iterations and then have another life for them, I think that's brilliant, you know? Because a lot of the time, like that crazy stuff, I mean, I think there is a whole realm of design that's like design for design's sake, like designers are geeked out about.
Yeah.
And I think that finding an avenue where you can take like kind of crazier, more wild concepts that will get shot down, but they're great, you know, and have a possible second life for it. That's great. I mean, that sounds like, yeah.
Speaking of like a second life, I mean, that kind of when Steffan was talking about the logos that didn't get chosen and finding another use for them, that's something that I'm totally, you know, I'm doing now. Is just like, okay, so if I create one piece, how many different ways can I use this or put this in the world? You know, I've been doing these dog coloring books, and then now I'm kind of entering in the NFT space. Maybe I could take those dog illustrations and do NFTs with them. Maybe I can make prints of them. I mean, how many different ways can you take, you know, one piece of artwork and you know, apply it differently in different spaces and everything? So I mean, it's just maximize that. And I know as far as like with logos, I assume, you know, I know when I was doing logos, it wasn't always the logo that the client chose that ended up in my portfolio. It's the one, like kind of like you said, the one that the designers are going to go nuts over or whatever. Sometimes yeah, that's kind of what goes in the portfolio and everything. So yeah.
It's funny because I reached out to Scott recently because I was going through, I have my little spank bank is what I call it. It's just a bunch of, it's a filing cabinet with a bunch of just crazy cool design stuff that I've snagged over the years. And when Josh and I were hanging out at Design Week, he had a booth and he was selling just these really cool pieces of art, prints and stuff. I bought a couple pins and I saw these things. I was like, holy crap, I haven't talked to Scott in like a year and a half, 2 years now. I got to reach out. But that's a cool use case of taking something that you've created. And I don't know if those were specifically made to be pins.
Which one were they? The retrovention ones, the enamel pins, or were they?
Yeah, the enamel pins. Yeah,
those were originally designed as prints, and then I kind of scaled them down, kind of simplified them, and then did pins out of them. Yeah, so yeah,
it's super cool though. And I mean, I have a bunch of things that I've made. I have an illustration of a monk that I did because I saw an image. I was listening to Rage Against the Machine, and one of their album covers had a monk, you know, on fire meditating in the street.
Yeah, dude, that album still holds up too.
It slaps. I have tickets. I'm waiting for them to stop pushing out the dates so I can go see them. I bought tickets like a year and a half ago.
I didn't know even though they finally got back together.
They're doing
and everything. Everyone.
No, they got Zach De La Rocca back in the band, and yeah, it's gonna be nuts. But I was looking at that album cover as I was just, you know, going through music, and I just started drawing this monk character, and I gave him this like triangle third eye kind of thing. And I had a buddy who's like, dude, you can like take that third eye thing out and use that as its own little thing. And I was like, dude, no way. Yeah, you're right. He actually got it as a tattoo on his wrist, which I thought was pretty cool. But there's so many things that you can do with the things that you make, whether they're active or in use, or, you know, like what Scott said, you know, taking those pieces and just, you know, trying to create sources of other sources of income with it. You know, like it's what a lot of designers don't think about is, hey, the project is dead once it's done. Yep. It's these assets sit in a file in Dropbox or Google Drive, and just they don't do anything. They collect digital dust, you know.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is just gold. I mean, it's just like that. People, they're not looking at the opportunity in that, and why not take something you've already created and see how else you can, you know, you can bring new life to it.
It's one of the things I love about Aaron Draplin, is that he takes everything he builds and it's a thing. It's an opportunity. He'll put stuff in his, you know, in his logo books and stuff, and he'll say, nobody knows that wasn't a logo for a client. Nobody knows that I just sat and made this thing just to make a thing. You know, you know, you guys know it because I'm telling you, but the industry doesn't know it, and the clients don't know it. They just see cool work and they're like, "Oh, this guy does good stuff." So I think it's important to still share things and use stuff that you've created, not let it just sit. You know, you never know what'll happen with it, or if it'll lead to some other kind of cool passion project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't give up on older projects that you still believe in, because they can have a second life. Part of the thing I can't talk about is one of those.
Yeah, and me too. Like I'm just right now. I've mentioned this before on another show. I'll just touch on it a little bit, but I'm just right now getting into doing NFTs, and I wouldn't have been in this position if I hadn't. This is all based on older stuff that I designed a long time ago, before NFT was even a thing. And when I created that, I put a lot of time in it, and it, you know, it's over the years, I've made my money back and then some, but it took a long time to get to that point. But now I'm in a position where this thing that I created is just the perfect thing for this NFT project that I'm working on, and it's requiring just a little extra work to tweak it and change a few things around. But it's something I created a long time ago that now it looks like could be something that could be a really good, you know, revenue generator and everything. So don't even, I mean, sometimes when you create something, it's not always dead. I mean, it might not just be, it might be before its time, or it might be, you know, might not be the right time, or it might be the right time when you do it, and there might be something else that comes up that you can repurpose. And especially if you own, if it's something you created for yourself and you own, I mean, and a lot of, you know, I assume with most contracts, I'm sure your contract stuff are the same, whereas if, you know, I assume anything that they don't, you know, a client doesn't use, that that you can use it for something else.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. That's something that a lot of people overlook. I've had friends who've written up design contracts, and it's like, yeah, all of the work that we create for you over the course of this agreement is yours, even if it's unused. It's like, you gotta get rid of that. Do they charge
300% more for that?
Nope, just don't know. Man. Like we're not lawyers, and so nobody knows. We actually hired a lawyer to rewrite our agreements and make sure that, yeah, like we want to make sure that we're not running into situations like that at all. But I think that's just something a lot of people overlook.
That totally applies for freelance, but if you work in-house somewhere, generally you're under contract and they own everything you do.
Well, yeah, the shop rule. Yeah, the shop rule is different. But if
it's your own shop and your own clients, like, yeah, screw that. Yeah. And if they're gonna get those rights, like, you know, think about, like, even if you're talking exclusive rights, like in the t-shirt game, right? Like, if you sell a t-shirt design, you can also write into the contract that it's for a specific amount of t-shirts, that if those t-shirts go out of print or whatever, it's kind of like a book contract. You're assigning rights for publication, but like if the book ever goes out of print for a specific amount of time, those rights revert back to you. And you can kind of take them wherever. So like, yeah, I mean, you can do that with designs too. You don't want to get too shady with your contracts, because then you want to be upfront with clients, but at the same time, like, the idea of giving clients exclusive right to everything that you're generating, I don't know.
Yeah, you know? I have a couple friends who also do like licensing terms for stuff as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I never used to do that so much with design, but definitely with illustration, I always, you know, it's all based on usage rights. And it's kind of scary because it seems like some people are kind of letting that go. And I hope that the industry doesn't change to the point where that's not like a thing anymore. You know, I don't know. It seems like a lot of people are willing to give up. Oh yeah, just whatever, you can use it on whatever. I'll just create it and you can use it on whatever. And, you know, and some customers and clients maybe getting, you know, in a position where they're asking for that, or they're expecting that. So I don't know.
I just use that as a point to upsell.
Yep.
Like if you want that, that's fine. I'll sell you the buyout right, but like it's gonna cost you.
Yeah, and that's a perfect negotiating tactic too. Is, you know, it's whatever, you know, whatever they can afford. Oh, they start off with they want everything, and then you say, well, do you really need everything? I mean, you can, if your you know, budget dictates this, and you don't, and you can't justify that, at least right now. Just purchase the rights to what you need, and then later on, if you want to do an animated something with it, then you can, and it's not like something, and I kind of reserve those rights to them if they want it. I'm not going to take their concept and then sell it to somebody else, but they have to, they would have to come back, and I don't know if that's kind of how, if you do any of that with the agency, Steffan, or not, but
yeah. I mean, for things like illustration, like Josh said, that's where it would make sense. But usually logos and stuff like that, no, it's your logo.
I haven't done anything like that. Now here's a question, because this is one thing that I, because I used to do a lot of like character branding, where I do a logo design and integrate a character in it. So you've kind of got an illustration worked into the logo, but in that case, I still categorize it as a logo, but then I guess a savvy customer could just ask you to do a logo with a character, and then just use that character for whatever else, take the character out. So I don't know.
And I've done some logos of like caricatures and things like that are just illustrative marks, and I just look at it just as that. It's a logo, regardless of the subject matter of it. It's a mark. It's going to be used for the same use case as a mark. But if you want me to take that character and re-illustrate it for different purposes and things, then we can have that conversation. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, even with logos, like, that's understood in design, which is why generally, like, the fee to work on a logo, because the conceptualization process is, like, really complex and long. There's a lot of marketing considerations that need to come into play that don't necessarily need to come into play for, like, an editorial illustration. And then also you're talking about something that's going to be, like, the brand identity of a company. And also they're getting a very substantial amount of rights to that image. Like they own that image. And so generally they're paying for that. Like that's part of the fee of working on a logo, as opposed to like a quick illustration or something. So that's something to consider too. Like, for people who are like new, if you're like, charging a certain amount for like a, skateboard graphic that you own the rights to, and it's just licensed for like 200 skate decks. Don't charge that for logo design, because you'd be insane for charging that for logo design. Like logo design takes a lot more work, and they're getting a lot more rights in return. So
I'm curious what it says about the four of us that we started out talking about personal projects, and now we're like discussing the finer points of contract law with client work.
So I do like kind of think we should get back on the rails of personal projects. Like, what do you think? Like, what do you guys like find to be the most valuable part of personal projects, like for yourselves? I'm just
the fame and prestige.
Yeah,
I
the ladies.
The freedom.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, to me, it's the freedom just to do what you want, kind of unencumbered by any expectations of anyone else, or just and sometimes, I mean, we've talked about this too, but sometimes those constraints can help you be more creative if you have those constraints. But in other cases, it's just nice to just dictate whatever you want to do, and just kind of create for the sake of creating without having to necessarily please anyone. So for me, it's more freedom. What about you, Steffan?
I'd say it's a combination of that and personal growth. I think that, at least for me, and you guys can let me know if you feel the same way, but I find it when I have that kind of freedom to just work on something for myself. I like to try new things. I like to get weird. I like to explore and search around and try to find new ways of doing things. Or a lot of personal projects I do end up just being things that are like outlets for me to push myself to be better. Like for a project I did years ago, that actually started developing into a little bit of my own illustrative style. I have this designer that I was following on Instagram who had this really cool, weird, almost dirty 90s Nickelodeon slimy kind of style that he did illustrations in. And I thought it was just one of the coolest things, one of the coolest styles I've ever seen. And so I wanted to do something with similar shading techniques to what he was doing, where he used, it was kind of like stippling, but not. He just had a lot of just like random little like texture dots and things that were like light and dark, and line weights that shifted around a lot and stuff. And so I did a personal project where my buddy would give me a really crappy drawing that he put together, like a just terrible, crude sketch. And he would say, "Oh, make this look cool." And so I made an illustration of that with kind of an inspiration from this other designer's style. And I tried out that kind of shading technique that he did and the line weights and stuff. And I really liked it. And the project came out, I thought it came out pretty cool. And that pushed me to learn A, new tools and new ways of creating, but B, to further develop and hone my own style and my own craft. So for me, there's a level of that where, I'm just free to just go out and try new things. I'm not worrying about deadlines. I'm not worrying about what the client specifically is asking for in the tiny box I've been put in. It's, I want to push myself, try something new and have some fun. So I think there's that marriage between the freedom and personal growth and development. For me, at least.
Yeah. Corey?
It's interesting as you bring that up. I was thinking, I can't think of a personal project that I've done that hasn't been a domino that's knocked over like more money or better jobs or bigger clients. Like I'm trying to think, like over the last like 20 years, I literally can't think of anything where I'm like, I want to do this for fun, that then somebody isn't just banging down your door and be like, I want to give you money for that. Or I want you to do that for me, or could you take that and do a thing? Like every single time you just level up in your skill set, and like that personal growth is great. And I love it just for the personal growth, but then, it's always within a year or two that somebody's like, hey, I saw this and I want you to, even before like social media was a thing that was happening. That's interesting. I haven't actually connected that until just now, but that's kind of an interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm seeing it with just the animation. I mean, since you've really started diving into this animation, the amount of stuff that you put out and what you've learned and how quick you are. I mean, every time you come on the show, you're doing some new animation. It's just like, and we're just watching it come together while you're on the show, and it's just like, and then what, you got a job to do a music video with your animation, and then it's just or whatever else. I mean, and this is stuff that you haven't really been doing that long,
Yeah, that music video just had 100,000 views.
Really?
Yeah,
awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's insane. That kind of reminds me of what I mentioned earlier with that RJ Palmer guy with the Detective Pikachu movie. He was just doing that as a fun, like, hey, I like illustrating these characters in my own unique way, and it turned out being like probably the biggest job he's had is like, hey, the largest IP on the planet
right
decided to be able to do their very first live action movie for character design. It's insane, but that's what can happen when you're persistent with it and you start pushing yourself to have fun and do crazy stuff.
And Dan Stiles talks about that. He calls it self-plagiarization, and his theory, which is hardly a theory, is that companies are risk adverse, and so they don't want to take a chance, but basically they'll see stuff that people have done, and they'll just come to you and say, that thing you did, can you do it for me?
Mm-hmm.
And so you just plagiarize your own work. Basically, you do what you want for fun, and then people are like, hey, can I pay you to do something similar that you just did, but put my logo on it? And you're like, sure.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, every day at my job, there's something I learned in my personal work that I am able to like kind of expand my skill set. Even with just messing around with animation, I've brought that to my workplace, where I'm like, now I can edit in After Effects and do like subtle animations and stuff. And for like corporate stuff, like it's surprising like how little complexity you need in After Effects to make something look really slick and professional. Yeah. And it's like, but all of that was learned from like, I want to make some music videos for these stupid songs I made. Like, I think it would be awesome to have this politician eating a bunch of followers and like on a conveyor belt. I'm going to figure out how to animate that. And then like by figuring that stupid thing out, like I've used that same trick on like a bunch of stuff professionally. It also makes you more comfortable with play like in the workplace, because like quite often, you know, when you're working professionally, you're going to be asked to do things you've never done before, or at least kind of lean into areas you're uncomfortable with. And if you're already doing that like on a daily basis, it definitely keeps you competitive. So I would throw that, because I kind of agree. I think that the biggest value in doing personal work is that I think that as artists and as human beings, we're trying to communicate. And I feel like if you feel like your story needs to be told, then you need to be working on your story in whatever way that is. But I think it's got like a psychological plus to it, making your own personal projects. I also think like it keeps you competitive. And honestly, I kind of think of it as an investment. Like I don't think of my comics as my own thing, or even my social media or anything like that. I think they're investments in staying relevant in a market that requires consistent investment. Like I feel like if you stop playing in that market, then you very quickly could become like, I could very quickly become the guy who's married to where I work. And then if my workplace falls apart, then I go through an identity crisis. Whereas like if I'm constantly building stuff on the side, I can go about it more like Scott did, where he just transitioned straight to his own stuff because he already had that going. Like there's already a head start there because you're working on it. It's like,
and it wasn't my choice, but the last job I had, was company downsizing or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you've got other stuff, it's kind of like that whole legs on the table theme or idea where, if you've got 3 legs on the table, you pull one out, it's going to fall down. You got 4, it's a little more stable. You got 5, 6, the more legs you have under that table, the better position you're going to be if one of those legs is pulled out.
100%. And like I definitely think like with like particularly in illustration and graphic design, it's like part of what got me a job as an art director over a lot of the career in-house guys is the fact that I had a bunch of personal work that was really cool that I could show like any art team and they'd be like, oh, that's awesome. And it's like, none of that stuff was like done in-house under like some corporate dude, like right. It's like, so I even showed my personal comics and stuff there. People were like, whoa, this is amazing. It's like that kind of stuff actually can get you work like in corporate and get you like a foot in the door in areas that like, had you not done that outside investment, you kind of lose that advantage, on a cold, like calculated way. That's another reason. Sorry.
Yeah, I had a situation once where an agency called me in. They saw my stuff online. And there was I think it was applying for a position there, and they looked at my work. They called me in. They said, you know what, I don't know. We don't know if this particular position is for you, but we just called you in because we love your personal stuff. I guess the stuff that I submitted that was more towards what they were doing, more corporate stuff. They said, yeah, this doesn't thrill us that much, but it's your personal. That's why we called you in. And then they ended up just buying a bunch of stuff off me, and with the idea that if they had like a project that kind of catered to what I was doing, they called me and everything. But so yeah, you never know. And that was all personal stuff. It wasn't the corporate looking stuff that I submitted that I thought was what they were looking for.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because it's definitely risky, and I feel bad like kind of saying like you just kind of make cool stuff and then stuff will come, because like that can't be a guarantee. But I can definitely say like most artists I know, that's been true, where it's like if you just kind of do the act of faith of just like consistently pursuing making really quality work outside of like your day job, like cool stuff inevitably starts happening. And you almost have to like just trust that it will. And hey, even if it doesn't, like you could be like a Van Gogh kind of scenario where like 10 years after or 20 years after you've died, like if people are like, this guy was a genius, who knows? But my point is, I think the investment's worth it,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about like companies and like the way that we talk about companies. Like there's kind of some toxic and somewhat manipulative ways that we discuss like companies, because we talk about like, oh, we're a family. It's like, no, this company isn't a family, because like a family wouldn't like fire people. You know what I mean? Like the company could be a fun place to work and it could be full of empathetic people, but like ultimately the company is not an organization that equates to like the way that we talk about companies. And so like personal work and the stuff that you're doing on the side, it makes you better. And by making you better, that does fit into a corporate structure, because corporate structures are there as value exchange machines, and so as you become more valuable, you have more that you can exchange within that system. But it's interesting to me that the real value to you personally is in the intrinsic change that happens to us, rather than in the money exchange that happens at work. Like that's nice, because I do need to buy things and I enjoy paying my rent and food and everything, and there's some accomplishment to making more money, or the challenge of landing a bigger client, or doing those types of things. But like it's always interesting to me when kind of younger creatives try to validate their work with money. It's like that's an empty hole to go after. Like the validation should come through other means that are longer lasting. Money just slips through everybody's fingers all the time.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I will say there's another nice byproduct that marries well with business, which is like, a lot of people who like don't do outside work outside of their business become really insecure, because they're so dependent on that business for their own well-being, that they're just like they're tethered to it. It's like it almost can become a toxic thing. And I think we've all had that, where like you work with somebody who's just like desperate, and we've talked about this on the show before. We had like with Gary, where we talked about like hunger versus desperation, and desperation just like makes people like, oh no like and the nice thing about working on work that gives you value as an artist, like in yourself, is like you can carry that wherever you go. So like, for me, if I'm not like a cartoonist today, then I don't feel as good about myself. But if I like knock out some panels, I feel pretty good. So I'm like, then that goodness that I'm feeling kind of translates to the people around me, and it gives like this positivity and like kind of like a lack of reliance on like a million different outside conditions for my own happiness. And like, I think that translates not only just the personal growth and the skill growth and stuff, but just like the confidence growth is huge too, Yeah.
That was a much more succinct way of saying what I said. Like basically, I like it, because basically when you do side projects, you get better, and that travels with you wherever you go and whatever you do.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's pretty good to wrap up. Is there anything that anyone wanted to add to that? I know we're getting close to our hour and a half mark, and we did finally get back to the personal side hustle, project part of it. So is there anything anyone wants to tack onto that before we start closing it out? No.
I wouldn't know what else to add on to that hasn't been said.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one thing. Stop making excuses and go out there and make cool art. And if you don't have a client paying for it, stop waiting for a client. Just make this stuff. That's all.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, I talk about that all the time. You don't need a client. I mean, create your own client. What's the client you want to work for, and just create that client and do the work and put that stuff in your portfolio and show it around. Yeah, it's probably better than if you're actually working for that client. So, all right. So, let's. I guess we'll start off with Josh. Josh, let everyone know where they can find you, and anything you want to promote.
All right, you can find me making stuff outside of my day job to keep myself passionate and invested in art. Things like this, 2 stories, book 1, which is a 120 hand-lettered, hand-inked graphic novel about faith and mental illness, about heavy, crazy topics, and it's on sale on Amazon. So go pick it up. And if you can't get it on Amazon, get it at your local comic book shop. And also make sure you're following me on YouTube because I'm posting a lot of crazy stuff, and I'm kind of curious to hear our audience's thoughts on some of those things. So
yeah, you're kind of back to doing the vlogging. You did, what did you do? 1 live stream? Are you gonna do more live streams too?
Yeah, I'm planning on getting back in the live stream business, especially because I've been monetized, but it's like that delay because I finally got the address verification. I put it in, and then I'm guessing there's like a delay between YouTube and AdSense to kind of make that happen. But the second that,
I don't remember.
Yeah, the second that kicks in, I'm monetized, so I'm going to be doing more live streams and also coming up with incentives for super chats.
Yeah. All right, Corey, what about you?
Instagram, occasionally YouTube. Those are the best places. But you can always go to CoreyKerr.com. I think I'm going to really start pushing my newsletter a little bit more and start doing that. So you can sign up there, and if you go to CoreyKerr.com/online or just click on what's new, I'll have whatever most recent thing is going on. There's a couple award-winning animations there if you haven't watched them yet, so you can go watch those there.
Corey, by the way, just I'm intrigued by this news thing, and now I really want to see more and hear more about it. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I was just playing with it, and so I don't have too much actually thought out. It's in its embryonic stages at the moment. So
all right, well, I've got a podcast I'm going to send you for inspiration on that.
Okay.
All right, Steffan, what about you? Where can everyone find you?
You guys can find me online. Our website, bridgephx.com, is my agency. On Instagram, just bridgephx, and my Instagram, Steffan Stewart.
Yeah, and those links are in the description of the video, so definitely check those out. And as far as me, you're on my channel, so that's where you can find my YouTube content. Check out Making Comics 101 if you want to have a free, very comprehensive course on YouTube. It'll take you every step of the process through making your own comic. And besides that, you can also find my stuff at circworks.com. I've got a couple shops up there, one for my physical stuff, prints, all that stuff, one for my digital tools and things that I make for comic book creators. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to promote. More coming up, and we are approaching our 300th episode. We got 2 more to go before we get there. Next episode will be our Halloween episode, and then after that will be our 300th episode. So definitely stay tuned. And if you want to stay tuned, the best way to do that is to join our mailing list. There's a link also in the description for our mailing list, and the way it works is because YouTube doesn't always notify people when a new episode or live stream is going out. So in order to kind of circumvent that, if you want to know when we're going to go live, the best way to do that is to join the mailing list. We don't spam you or anything. We just send out a notification about 30 minutes ahead of time, and we'll tell you who our guest is going to be, who our topic's going to be, and all of that. So, and like I said, we got some cool episodes coming out, so definitely join that mailing list if you haven't already. Yeah, other than that, we will see you guys next week for our Halloween episode. Later, everyone. Oh, and thanks everyone. Thanks to the chat. Thanks to our guests. And yeah, we'll see you next week.